So far in this course, we've covered the basics of cloud computing in AWS, including computing in EC2, Lambda, and Beanstalk. If you recall, EC2 were AWS's virtual machines that are highly configurable. Lambda is compute power that's completely managed so that you don't have to mess with the operating system or the underlying instances. And Elastic Beanstalk was a very easy way to get applications up into the cloud very quickly. We also covered S3, EFS, and Glacier. We pointed out that S3 was very easy to use and intuitive object storage. Elastic File System was highly scalable and shareable storage for EC2 instances and other occasions. And Glacier was very affordable, infrequent access storage. We also very quickly covered the difference between regions and availability zones, and we pointed out that regions were different physically isolated places that AWS offers you to deploy resources into, and that each region had multiple availability zones inside it. Another thing we covered was the shared responsibility model, and we talked a little bit about which parts of your security are your responsibility and which parts are AWS's responsibility. And finally, we touched on AWS service limits and how to get around them by completing a service request. For EC2 instances, we learned what an EC2 instance is, which is the fundamental virtual machine that AWS offers for compute in the cloud. We learned that from the EC2 dashboard, you can view running instances, and then for each instance, you can view all sorts of information, including any public DNS information it has, the VPCs and subnets that it's attached to, any security groups that it belongs to, and IAM roles that it belongs to. We also learned that if we launch an instance, we get to decide the AMI, or Amazon Machine Image, that we use for it. We also get to decide which instance type we use for it, which pertains to the amount of CPU and memory it has, how to deploy it into different subnets or VPCs, and then how to assign different IAM roles to it, what EBS is, and how to both change the amount of storage that's stored on EBS, as well as attach multiple EBS volumes to it, how to configure security groups, and then finally, how to use key pairs to access the server once we've deployed it. We learned that security groups control ingoing and outgoing access for servers. And we also learned how to use launch configurations and auto-scaling groups in combination with load balancers and target groups to automatically scale in and out for our EC2 instances. For S3, we learned what S3 is, which is Amazon's fundamental, very intuitive bucket and object-based storage service. We learned that storing something is as simple as having a bucket and a key, which is location inside the bucket of any object. We learned that when we upload a new object, we can choose storage classes, encryption, and we can also add metadata and tags. For buckets, we learned that if we create a bucket, we can enter specific unique DNS compliant names and choose a region that we deploy the bucket into. We also learned that we can enable versioning and server access logging for the bucket, as well as encryption using a couple of different methods. We learned that while creating a bucket, we can also edit permissions for different owners and users for that bucket. Also, for any particular bucket, we learned that we can change its properties, including versioning, server access logging, default encryption, and several others. And finally, we learned that we can change the bucket policy to allow different people to perform different actions on the bucket, and then we can also edit our cross-origin resource sharing using CORS configuration for the bucket.